Welcome to the HR Kyle podcast, your go-to source for insightful discussions on leadership, job searching, and all things human resources. I'm your host, HR Kyle, and each week we dive deep into topics relevant to professionals seeking to elevate their careers and organizations. Whether you're a seasoned leader, a job seeker navigating the ever-changing landscape of employment, or an enthusiast looking to stay ahead of the curve, this is the podcast for you. Join me as we explore practical strategies, share expert insights, and engage in meaningful conversations that empower you to succeed in today's dynamic workplace. So, adjust your headphones and let's dive in. Hello and welcome to another episode of the HR Kyle podcast. We're so glad you could join us today. And for this episode, we're going to take a little bit different approach to the subject matter. Normally, myself or Becki or some of our listeners and some of our contributors will suggest a topic, and then we'll go with that, and we'll build an episode around that, and we'll find a guest that can speak to that. Well, this episode's a little bit different because our guest that we're going to have in segment 2 is actually the driver of the topic. And it's a little bit different, but I think especially in the climate that we live in now and some of the things that are happening in the world, I think this is a very relevant topic, whether we're talking about the work world or just our everyday lives. The author of this book, and she's our guest in segment 2, is Dr. Laura Gabayan. And her book is specifically called Common Wisdom: 8 Scientific Elements of a Meaningful Life. And we're going to have a really wonderful conversation in segment 2 with Dr. G as she goes by and talk about her book and a lot of the lessons that we can use, not only in our work lives, but as I say, just in our personal lives. But in segment 1, Becki and I are going to break this topic down a little bit further from our perspective. And that being common wisdom or common sense, and specifically how we can use that better, more effectively in our work lives. So that's going to be the topic of the day. But before we get to that, we do need to get to a quick break, but we'll be right back after this.
Are you ready to find the career you love? Navigating today's job market alone can be overwhelming and costly. Outdated templates and generic approaches can waste your time and lead to missed opportunities. That's where HR Kyle's career search services come in. With over 25 years of talent acquisition experience, Kyle Patrick Smith is here to guide you every step of the way. We specialize in crafting eye-catching resumes, preparing you for interviews, and helping you discover the careers where you'll truly thrive. Our trusted network of recruiters opens doors to exclusive roles you won't find on job boards. Our clients don't just search. They land jobs with focus and direction, using effective, up-to-date strategies. If you're serious about your career, visit hrkyle.com or call 330-5554-5264 for your free consultation. Don't waste another day with outdated methods. Your dream job is within reach.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that brief break. And as I kicked it off at the beginning of the show today, I said we're going to be talking about something just a little bit different, but something that can be incredibly impactful to our work lives and, for that matter, our personal lives. And that is this idea of common wisdom, or what we might call just common sense, and utilizing that to have a happier, more meaningful, productive work life. So Becki and I are going to break that topic down here in segment 1 and share from our perspectives and the lessons that we've learned around these topics. So as I do each week, I'm going to welcome HR Kyle Becki to the studio, and I'm going to hand the reins over to her.
Hi, Kyle, on this nice, sunny, wintry day. It's good to be back.
Great to have you as always. Looking forward to this discussion today.
Yeah, and this is an interesting topic because life and work can really just be so simple if you use some common sense along the way.
Very true. I think a lot of times we overcomplicate situations and we make things more difficult than they need to be.
Right, as we talk about driving versus something at work as well.
Yep. Very true. We live in an age now where the car almost drives itself, and in some cases
Right.
they do, but yet we have more accidents and more difficulties driving now
Yeah,
than I think we've ever
exactly.
had. So yeah, great example. But yeah, you're in control here, Becki. You're running the show, so I'm going to follow your lead.
Well, explain how applying common sense in the workplace decision making can improve team dynamics.
Well, exactly. So often the best solution is actually the simplest one. And where common sense comes into play, because it is quote unquote common, it's very easy to get your team to rally behind it
Mm-hmm.
because everybody can see the logic behind it. It doesn't require a lot of explanation or description. People understand that. And a lot of times that's really all it takes to get a team to rally behind an initiative or your goals is if they understand what they are, they make sense to them, and it's something that they can do easily enough.
Right. And that goes along with just fostering a more content and collaborative environment.
Absolutely. The simpler we can make our lives, I don't think I'm saying anything radical here, the better and happier we will be. Where our lives become unhappy and difficult and complicated is when we make them complicated, and especially in circumstances where it's really not necessary.
Right. Well, talk to us about practicing kindness and humility, and how does that build a positive workplace culture?
Well, exactly. And there's an old saying, but it's as true now as it's ever been. We may not remember a person's name, but we'll always remember how they made us feel.
Yep.
And if you've ever been around someone that made you feel terrible and just beat you down and was degrading, you're going to remember that person. Again, you may not remember their name, but you're sure going to remember all that. And by the same token, and in a better way, if you have a boss or a leader that you found that no matter the circumstance was kind and was understanding and was reasonable and level-headed and utilized that common sense, you're going to remember that. You're absolutely going to remember that.
Right. And that's true. In my 40 years in education, and I've had many principals, definitely can remember the 2 or 3 that used kindness and trusted me to work in the way I was supposed to work.
Yep. And I'm going to take a leap of faith here. I'm going to bet that those are the times that you feel like you did your best work.
Yes, definitely.
Yep. Because I don't know if I've ever spoken to anybody. I've spoken to a lot of employees. I don't think I've ever had an employee come up to me and say, that boss is abusive and I'm doing the best work I've ever done.
Right.
Nobody's ever
Exactly.
said that. It hasn't
Right.
happened. But I've had plenty of people come up to me and say, so-and-so is a great boss because they listen to me. They're kind. They try to understand my circumstance. Yes, I know we have work to do, and they make that clear to me, but they also try to work with me to make sure that we're effective, and I feel like I'm heard, and they say good morning and all those other little things. Because one of the complaints that I hear about bosses sometimes, and this is not an exaggeration, they don't say hello. They don't say good morning. They don't check in on me. They don't ask how the holiday was or the weekend was. All these little things. That's kindness. That's what kindness is. Being kind is caring about another person legitimately.
Right.
That's kindness.
And in looking in other directions as well, then how can the leaders use this common wisdom to navigate workplace challenges like conflict resolution, fostering inclusion, and that promotes that collective well-being?
Yeah, great question. A lot of it comes down to just looking at making a reasonable point. So in other words, so many of these things that we talk about, we act like they're radical concepts. Let's be inclusive and let's get people on board with this. There's nothing radical about that. I mean, that just makes good business sense. Companies that are good at that are better operated. They're more profitable. They're more successful. So again, what you do is you appeal to individuals' reasonableness. What sounds reasonable to them? What are they going to understand? So many times it's the simplest things. So it's, hey, if we're going to see a profit for this month, these are the things that need to happen, X, Y, and Z. Well, everybody gets that.
Right.
No matter what your role is, you're going to understand that. If you're talking to your sales team, and again, not to oversimplify it, but sometimes it comes down to this. Okay, guys, we got 3 weeks left in the quarter. If we're going to meet our goals, here are the things that need to happen. It's this, that, and the other. People understand that.
Right.
Don't
And
overcomplicate it.
for you and I, it comes quite naturally. But what if you have a leader where this doesn't come naturally to them?
Well, for one, I hesitate to call that person a leader,
True.
because to be a leader, you need to be able to relate to the people that you lead. And one of the best ways to do that is realize that you're there for them, not vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, if you just start to approach your interactions with your team from that perspective, meaning I'm here for you. What do I need to do for you? I know what the goals are, team, but what
Right.
do I need to do for you to help you achieve those goals individually and for us to do it as a team?
Right.
And you hear the idea of servant leadership and all that. I don't know if I necessarily go that far sometimes. I think we can get carried away with those catchy terms. But I do firmly believe that as a leader, you're the keeper of the goals.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you're judged against. And the way that you achieve those goals is by leading your team to collectively work towards that. And the way that you do that is you find out how can you make them the most successful.
Right. And just a thought too, or suggestion for those type of leaders, it doesn't come naturally. I mean, you may have to just sit in your car for, a few seconds, minutes when you get there to work and put on that face.
Yep.
And realize that is your job to lead.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, there's the classic statement, but it's true. Sometimes you got to fake it till you make it.
I was going to say that. Yes, exactly.
And that's okay. And, it's okay too, as a leader, to admit to your team, sometimes I'm just not very good at this, but I'm sure working on it. And people will appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
If you make a mistake, or if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, but you quickly catch yourself and say, you know what? Shouldn't have done that. That's not how we want to be here. That's not how I want to be. I'm going to work on that. People aren't going to have less respect for you for doing that. They're actually going to have more respect for you. Right. So be honest with your team and say, I know this is how we can be successful. I'm working on this. I'm working on my mindset so that I do come to it from the standpoint of what do I need to do to make you successful. There are times I'm going to slip up and I'm going to lose track of that. But if we both stay accountable to each other, we can get there.
Right, and this just returns to our topic of leading with common sense.
Yeah, exactly. You know what the biggest driver of common sense as a leader is? How would I want to be led?
Right.
If you want your boss to give you freedom, allow you to make decisions, trust that you're using your time well, be there when you have questions or when you need hurdles removed, then that's the kind of leader you need to be.
Exactly.
And that's where the common sense comes in. Don't overthink this. If you want to be a great leader, ask yourself how someone can be a great leader for you. Right. And then replicate that.
Exactly. Well, let's just kind of finish up here and talk about ways that can be simple, common sense practices, like clear communication, recognizing employee efforts. I mean, how does that create a happier, more productive workplace?
Well, again, we as humans, we're really good in filling in blanks, whether it's time, space, noise, whatever. So you as leader need to make sure that you don't have a lot of blanks sitting around, meaning where someone could make an interpretation. And unfortunately, too, as humans, we fall into this habit that when we're filling in that, we fill it in with something negative. So I'll use a quick example. We've reached out to someone and it's been a couple of days and they haven't gotten back to us. Well, naturally, so often we assume, they're ignoring me. They don't have time for me. This, that, and the other. But come to find out, they were in a car accident or they've been really ill and they haven't been able to respond to anyone.
Right.
So as leaders, fill in those gaps for your employees. If they have a question and they reach out or they need additional resources or something, give them an answer. And I always say they may not always like the answer, but they'll appreciate the fact that they got an answer.
Yes.
So for that employee that says, oh, geez, this machine, I really need this machine replaced. It keeps breaking down. It's holding me up. Can you please do something about it? And if the answer is no, I'm sorry right now, I can't get approval for that budget. Tell that employee that, I'm sorry. It's something I've looked into. At this point, senior leadership has not approved that capital expense. We're going to have to make do. I know it's not the best answer for you. I'll look for ways that maybe I can make this a little bit easier. I understand if this thing's breaking down and it's holding you up, so I'm going to cut us some slack relative to productivity and so on. But unfortunately, that's where we are right now. But let's see what you and I can do together to at least make it better until I can get approval for that new machine.
Right. Just common sense communication.
Yes. Yep. And
That's
again,
great.
The same kind of communication you would want in that scenario.
Exactly.
And I say this all the time too, and you know this. We live in an age now where we have so many communication tools. It's extraordinary. You and I have both worked in the work environment where all we had was telephone or, face to face. Those are only two options.
Right.
Didn't have any of this other technology. Now you've got a phone you can communicate with, you got a desktop, you got a laptop, you got you can do it. You can do it in your car. You can be driving down the road and messaging people.
Exactly.
I mean, we are so connected. We live in an age now where communication, it's shocking to me that there's ever not communication.
Right. And quickly.
Right.
Quick communication.
Yep.
I agree. Well, again, another fantastic topic, and enjoy the conversation as usual. Thank you again for having me.
No, always great to have you, Becki. I love these conversations that we have. Our audience does as well. I get positive feedback every week. So I think we need to keep doing this. And I'm looking forward to having everyone listen into segment 2 as well with Dr. G. She has got some wonderful thoughts. She has taken a scientific approach to this topic that we're talking about today, common wisdom. So we're going to take a quick break right now. But when we come back, we got Dr. G and telling us everything we ever needed to know about common wisdom. So stay tuned.
Are you stuck in a job you hate? Dreaming of a career that excites you? It's time to turn those dreams into reality with Get the Job You Love by Kyle Patrick Smith, also known as HR Kyle. Discover proven strategies to land your dream job, master interviews, and stand out from the crowd. Packed with expert advice and practical tips, Get the Job You Love is your ultimate guide to career success. Available now on Amazon and other online retailers. Don't wait. Start your journey to a fulfilling career today. Get the job you love. Because you deserve a job you love.
Greetings, I'm Kyle Smith, and I'm here to offer you a speaking experience that goes beyond the ordinary. With a rich background in leadership, HR, and personal development, I bring a unique blend of expertise and passion to every presentation. Whether it's Leadership Unleashed, well-being at work, or career mastery, I delve into topics that empower individuals and organizations to reach their fullest potential. What sets me apart? Proven expertise, an engaging delivery style, and actionable insights that drive positive change. But here's the kicker. I don't just offer a one-size-fits-all approach. I customize my content to meet the specific needs and goals of your event. So let's elevate your event together. Contact me now to reserve your date and unlock the full potential of your audience and organization. Don't miss out on the opportunity to inspire greatness. Visit hrkyle.com today. Hello and welcome to segment 2 of the HR Kyle podcast. Again, I'm your host, HR Kyle. And as I say probably every week, and this week really is no different, I'm excited to welcome a guest into the studio to talk about a topic that she's an expert on. We talked about it a little bit in segment 1, and that's the topic of wisdom. So I welcome my guest into the studio today. Her name is Dr. Laura Gabayan. She's a physician researcher, and most recently, she released a book called Common Wisdom, 8 Scientific Elements of a Meaningful Life. And Dr. Gabayan, welcome to the HR Kyle podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's our pleasure. And Dr. Gabayan, starting off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I went to medical school and then I did residency in emergency medicine. And then I did more training in research. And I was publishing in academia. And then I would say around 2013, my body started to fall apart. And as you can tell, I don't speak that clearly. And my muscles became weaker. And then I started to think, well, physicians are very interested in labeling and putting you into boxes. Oh, you have this, you have that. And who thinks outside the box? Who doesn't do that? And it was the wise. And so then I looked into wisdom. And I noticed that we didn't really know much about it. And as a scientist, I knew how to do a project. And so I put together the Wisdom Research Project, and I spoke with 60 wise individuals across North America. Now, 60 may not seem like a high number, but trust me, I spent hours every week asking for just one wise person. It was not easy to find these people. And then I interviewed them and I used my research skills to come up with the 8 elements. And that's what I put in the book.
Well, and that's a fascinating story, just how your curiosity as a scientist really got the best of you, and you pursued a subject that I think sometimes we just take for granted, that we know the definition of wisdom. But in your case, you didn't choose to take that for granted. You wanted to dive into a little bit further and get to the bottom of it, correct?
Yeah, well, the thing with the wisdom is before I felt like all we knew was what we saw. Oh yeah, that's the wise person. Oh yeah. And being the scientist, I had to break it down. I was not okay with just yes or no answers. I wanted to break it down into reasons why or elements of, and that's what I did.
Well, in Dr. Gabayan, you mentioned about your health failing and so on. And again, you don't have to get into the specifics, but what part of that motivated you to dive into this topic of wisdom further?
I think it really was how physicians, and I can say it because I am one, I learned so much, and they're so used to putting things into categories that they're used to, and labeling and giving a diagnosis. And I really wanted to, talk to people who were not interested in the norm, who had a wider lens. And initially, I did not know that I'd be talking to them, but I noticed that the only people who can identify the wise are other wise people. And that's why I spoke to 60 people.
Is there a significance to the number 60 as part of this?
I felt like I saw a lot of the same things at 20. But I would say that being the scientist that I am and having been used to, doing work on hundreds of thousands and millions of people, big data, I was not happy with a lower number. So no, there wasn't a significance, but I just felt like it was the point where I just kept hearing similar things.
Yeah. Yeah. The data told you you were at the right point.
Right.
Yeah. Now, the next question, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and I gave you the questions in advance, so I know I'm putting you on the spot with this one. We can talk about it a little bit. But the theme of, obviously, this podcast is the world of work. So my questions tend to lean towards that. So with that in mind, how do you believe the insights from the Wisdom Research Project, which is the initiative that drove the book, How can that be applied to enhance leadership and decision making in the workplace?
Well, I'll tell you what the 8 elements were that I found in the project, and I wrote in my book, Common Wisdom. Resilience, kindness, positivity, spirituality, humility, tolerance, creativity, and curiosity. And when you think about it, a leader would really benefit from being great at a majority of those elements. And whether it's being kind or humble to the people they interact with, or just being very curious and creative in how they approach things, or resilient when things are not as great as they expect. Whatever it is, I think the qualities will lead one to master whatever they're doing.
Well, and Dr. Laura, that's what drew me to want to have this conversation with you and have you join me, is you've taken such a unique and different approach to a topic that so often is people try to put a tangible value behind it. They try to put an IQ behind it, which is a number or some other level of accomplishment. But you've taken, for lack of a better term, or what we call sometimes in my world, soft skills, and you've placed more of a value on them from a wisdom standpoint. Can you elaborate on that further?
Yes, it's funny because it's fair. You said soft skills, but it's kind of approaching an age-old topic with very rigorous scientific methods, and that's what I use to kind of arrive at the 8. And that's it. That's where the difficult part came in, was my doing. Outside of that, the book, that's the Common Wisdom, talks about these 8, and it's easy to read. And it makes it tangible by making it simple but powerful. So I think a leader, whatever they be, whatever they're doing, or someone who works in a company, or whatever it may be, will benefit from learning all of these.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think as you, a point that you made to me offline is there really isn't one of these elements that you can single out and say, okay, if you're really good at this one, this will lead to good leadership. To your point a moment ago, and what you stressed to me is it's really those 8 elements working in concert.
It is. And you know what? In my humility chapter, I talk about how the economist talks about how humility is the secret sauce to being, a great leader. And I feel like it's more than just being humble. It's more than that. But I did say one of my 60 is the CEO of many companies, 5. And he talks about how and I talk about him in the humility chapter. His name is Tom. And when he talks about how when you're leading a company, it's really important to think of yourself at the bottom of a triangle, not the tippy top, but at the bottom. And that way you're kind of able to connect with people more and learn and lead to success. So I do think they are interrelated. I don't think humility is the only factor. And I do think it's really important to kind of get a feel for what you're good at and what you're not. And that's why my book, Common Wisdom, kind of talks about those 8 elements, and you can look at it and be like, wait, this will help me relate to people more, and this will not.
Well, and I think that's another striking thing about your book as well. And obviously, it's grounded heavily in scientific research. That's where you're from. That's your approach to this topic. But from what I understand, it has a very relatable writing style. And I think that had to be important to you, and I know it is, so that someone, regardless of where they are in life, regardless of their role, could pick this up, read through this, become a student of what it is that you're talking about, and be able to apply these principles, again, in this case, to a work environment.
And that was actually my goal. I had written so many dense and boring manuscripts. I was ready to write something relatable and easy to read because, I mean, I'm an immigrant. I came here. I wasn't in English as a second language ESL classes for a long time, but I was there enough to know I want everyone to understand everything I wrote. So when I wrote it, the goal was to be simple but powerful. And that was my intention with writing the book too.
Well, that clearly comes through because again, that seems to be a common theme in the reviews and so on that I read. And for those listening, you're thinking, well, gosh, you have Dr. Laura on your show and you don't read the book. Well, I shared that with Dr. Laura that I purposely didn't because I wanted to approach this discussion just like my listeners with a high level of curiosity and just to try to understand the concepts and so on that we're talking about. And, you know, I find this very enlightening, and it also leads to further thoughts. And I hope from my listener standpoint that you're already thinking about this and looking to buy this book, Common Wisdom, and apply it to the workplace situations that you come in contact with. Well, Dr. Laura, in the last few minutes that we have, in what ways do you think managers and team leaders can incorporate these principles from Common Wisdom into their daily interactions, and even beyond that, strategies to improve the team dynamics of the teams that they lead and ultimately drive towards success of their team goals as well as their company goals?
I think kindness, which was my second element, is really important. And I think you do better kind of relating your points. And it's very easy to do. And also when you try to connect with someone, being kind to them is really important. And it kind of shows confidence in a way. It shows that you're confident with yourself and what you're saying and what you're doing. So kindness, I feel like, is really important. And of course, all the other elements. I mean, being humble and also realizing that things happen for you and not to you. And that's the idea of being spiritual. And, and when you lead a project or whatever team you're in or dynamic, I think the first and foremost, you need to realize you're interacting with people. So I mentioned this in the book. Treat others like how you want to be treated, and that's really important.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for the golden rule, and it's interesting because when I talk to leaders and I coach leaders on different concepts, that is one thing that I come back to. You know, treat others how you'd want to be treated. When we talk about leadership principles, we always talk about, okay, let's talk about the worst leader you've ever had and who's the best you've ever had. Again, to help them understand how they may be portraying themselves to others. And I think there's one other thing that I want to draw from the comments that you just made, and that is how you spoke about a confidence, that you're actually exhibiting confidence when you exhibit kindness, when you exhibit the caring and some of the other essential elements. I know we've only got a few minutes left, but could you speak to that just for a moment?
Yes, and that was the element that was most surprising to me because I'm Middle Eastern and kindness is not revered where I came from. It's viewed as a weakness. And so I thought more about kindness, and I feel like kindness is a strength. When you are kind, you're able to effectively relay your points. You're going to do a better job and people will listen to you. If you're trying to speak at them, not to them, and you're not kind, people won't listen. And so by being kind, I feel like you do a lot better in whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, that people are much more receptive to being treated well. They're more
Yes.
receptive to the message. Wonderful thoughts. And again, Dr. Laura, I want to thank you for coming on to our show today and sharing this, giving us a different perspective on wisdom. And again, helping us understand where these concepts can be used in the workplace, whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're in a leadership position, whether you're part of a team, where these can really come into play to lead not only to your own success, but the success of others. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's been a real pleasure. And folks, I want to thank you as well for tuning in to yet another edition of the HR Kyle podcast. And if you're not following us, first off, help me understand why. But beyond that, I hope that you will start following the podcast so you can be up to date on the episodes that are coming out. You can take a look at past episodes and again, just stay current on the things that we're doing. But I certainly want to thank you for tuning in today. Much appreciated. And I'll leave you with this. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the HR Kyle podcast. We hope you found our discussion valuable and filled with insights that you can apply in your professional journey. Whether you're a business leader aiming to foster a thriving workplace or a job seeker looking to carve out your own path, remember that HR Kyle is the compass that can guide you towards success. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your network. We're committed to being your trusted source for HR wisdom, and we look forward to having you back with us for our next episode. Remember, in the world of HR and professional growth, there's always room for progress. Be sure to visit our website at hrkyle.com. That's hrkyle.com to learn more about how we can help you meet your business and professional goals. So until next time, this is HR Kyle signing off. Stay motivated, stay informed, and keep reaching for those career goals. Music provided by bensound.com. That's bensound.com.